Hello and welcome to Visual Literacy 010. In the program this week we're looking at photography, and as a special treat we have a guest in the studio. Her name is Marilyn Davis Moore, and I'd like you to meet Marilyn. Hello Marilyn, and welcome to the studio.
Hello Carl, and thanks for having me.
I'm delighted that you're here because you're going to answer some intriguing questions about photography. Now, let's think about how a camera works. I mean, there are so many different types of cameras available, and I thought we'd start with what types do you have and how do they differ?
Well, it all depends on what you want to use your camera for. Starting out, people might use a point-and-shoot camera, such as this one.
A point-and-shoot, all right?
Yes, very, very basic, about $10.
Good.
It's not very good if you want to be serious about photography, though, for the reasons that I'll show you on the screen here.
Yes.
What you see at the top of the viewfinder is not necessarily what you get recorded on the film plane, because the light enters through the lens here and hits the film, but what you're seeing is something far above that. So you tend to cut the heads off, and also you'll see the viewfinder is to one side of the camera. You quite often miss people out of a group shot. So if you are getting a little bit more serious about your imagery, you really have to go up to an SLR.
You know, that's never been explained to me before, but I quite understand now how it works, that you're seeing things up here, but the light is actually coming in here. So of course it's quite easy to chop somebody's feet off, or, you know, and then that part that the lens is over to, or the viewfinder is over to one side. So obviously, you know, you're not really seeing what the camera is seeing.
That's right.
And how's that different from the next one?
This is an SLR camera, single lens reflex.
Single lens reflex. Now you're going to explain that, aren't you?
Yes.
Good.
Also with the SLR, you can take the lenses off. So if you want to buy a camera, make sure you can take the lens off. The lens does all the work. This is mainly just a body recording the film. And I think the next
oh yes.
image will show a diagram of an SLR.
Here we go. Ah, yes.
So with the SLR, this is the reflex part here, the little mirror. When the light enters the lens, it hits the mirror, goes up into a prism, reflects, and back into your eye. So what you're seeing is what the actual film is on the same level as the lens and the film. What you're seeing is what you get.
Right.
Now,
so the light comes in here, hits the mirror, that is deflected up to this prism, and that then is what the eye sees. So in actual fact, the eye is seeing exactly what's coming in through here. Right.
And of course, when we want to record the film, the mirror has to swing up out of the way. Otherwise, we'll take a picture of a mirror. Yes. So the next one shows when we press the shutter release, the mirror has swung up to the top, so we can't see anything when the picture's been taken, and the light is recorded onto the film.
And this is where the film is situated at the back of the camera here.
That's right.
So it comes straight in because the mirror has gone up and also closed off that area.
So when you finish taking the shot, the mirror swings back down again and you can see your next shot.
You know, it's remarkably like the old camera obscura, isn't it? Really is. You can see how it developed down through that. And when you think of all the mechanics that are involved, and the science that is involved, it really is very fascinating. Okay.
So after that one, if you're even more serious about photography, you go to the medium format. This is what commercial photographers use, something similar to this one. The main difference between this is the size of the film. This is the size of the film for a medium format camera.
Right. Let me put that on a white surface. Right, so that's the actual size. And this is what you're seeing on the screen here. And this is what we call a negative, isn't it?
That's right. With the 35mm SLR, the size of the film is much smaller, about that size.
Right.
So that if you are a commercial photographer, your main objective is for resolution and very sharp imagery for reproduction in magazines or...
Right. When you say resolution, that is sharp edges or...
Sharp all over.
Sharp all
Everything
over.
you're looking at within the film plane should be sharp. Yes, I think so, unless you're talking about depth of field, which we'll talk about later.
Later.
Now, with these little cameras, some of the film is even tinier. It's about that size. So if you wanted to produce a billboard photograph and blew this tiny little negative up, it'd just be
Let's put that behind there.
It would just be a complete blur. So you can't do it with that camera.
Right.
You need to go up to bigger cameras with bigger film. Now we have another film size here, which is a 5.4.
And that comes up on the next screen.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at that on the screen as well.
Now you can see this image is extremely sharp because of the size of the film. We haven't had to blow it up. And when this one's blown up, it will still remain very sharp. That is why you have to have bigger and better cameras when you become serious.
Yes. So
about photography.
that little one that you're playing with is what you call a $10
It actually
job.
cost about that.
Right. And
These,
this one,
$6,000 or $7,000.
$6,000 or $7,000 new.
Yeah.
Right. Big difference.
It all depends on how many lenses you want with the camera. The standard lens for this camera is about an 80mm lens. So if you want to do weddings or portraits, you'd probably get a 150mm lens so you can get a little closer to the subject.
Now, I suppose every part of the camera is important, but one of the integral parts, of course, is the type of film used. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the different types of film that is available?
Just before we go on to that one, I just want to show you this digital camera, which doesn't have film.
Oh, what do you mean it doesn't have film?
Well, it's got a memory in here, and you just take the photographs, and it's stored on this memory disk, and you connect it up to the film with your software, and then you see your images up on your computer screen, and print them out from there. So there's no need to go through that negative stage. But with digital cameras, as you can see here, we talked about the size of the lens and the work that it does. This is a very expensive camera. Probably when this one was bought, it was like $1,000 or $2,000. And you can see that it's almost similar to this $10 one.
Well, yeah.
The lens, actually.
The lens size, yes.
So when you're buying a digital camera, even though it's new technology and you don't need negatives, to be really serious, you have to buy a very expensive, to get the same quality of an SLR, you have to buy a very expensive digital camera. But one way of getting around that, which I'm doing at the moment, is using an SLR and having my images scanned professionally, put those into the computer, manipulate the imagery, and then print those out so that you still have control of the negative stage and you don't have to buy a really expensive digital camera. And I like the way of being in control with your negs, being able to touch them. And
yes, I'm finding more and more with artists that they like to have control. I mean, for so long, you know, since the introduction of computers, the computer controls the person rather than the other way around. So it's good to hear, you know, that you like to control all the images coming right down through. That's very important. Now, I didn't mention film, and I obviously cut you in midstream, but let's have a look at film now.
Okay. I think that there's two things you have to worry about when you're buying film to use. If it's colour balance, and with both colour and black and white, it's speed of the film. I think the next shot
on the screen here,
shows a shot that I took with the right colour balance in the right conditions. This was on the box of film that you buy, it will tell you the ASA.
ASA.
Which is the speed rating of the film.
All right.
Now, ASA is balanced for daylight. So I took this shot with the 100 ASA film in daylight, and of course you get good results, good colour saturation.
This is like what we would say a fashion shot, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for fashion magazines, fashion shows, yes, it
Oh,
works.
but they do take shots inside as well, but you choose other films for that.
Right.
If you're taking a shot inside, you would choose to buy a film for the lighting conditions inside. To take a daylight film inside and use that with different
Ordinary.
lighting, like tungsten light, you will get a blue cast over the film. Everything will come out blue, basically.
Oh.
And I think the next shot shows when I've actually taken a daylight film inside, and this wasn't with tungsten light, this was with fluoros, and they'll give you a green cast.
Oh, and you can definitely see that in this one here. So this is due to the fluorescent lighting.
That's right, with the daylight film.
With a daylight film. It does create a sort of an eerie effect, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and if it's a mistake, then you've lost a lot of film.
Yes.
But to get around that, photographers just put a filter over the end of their lens to balance the film back again.
Right.
So if you had a daylight film and had to take it inside with tungsten lighting, or this lighting, you'd put a balance film, and then it would get the correct colour balance.
It self-corrects.
It self-corrects with the filter.
But looking at this shot here, you can see how in the film world or television world, they can create eerie images like you know, a ghost scene or a spooky quality of an impending murder or something like that by using this kind of imagery.
That's right. If you know what the products do, then you can manipulate them. And I did this on purpose because I'm interested I have a background in fine art. I'm more interested in fine art photography. So I did that. And the next couple of shots show an extension of how I manipulated it even more.
Right. Let's have a look at the next one then. And it'll show...
Same lighting conditions, but I've sandwiched another colour over that to give that ghostly sort of effect. This was for a series of slides, a slide presentation I was doing, and I had about 100 of these.
Ooh.
All different colours and shapes.
Different colours, and to show, of course, the fine art quality, but also to show, you know, what you could do.
It was programmed to music as well, which enhanced it.
Yes, that's always important, isn't it? That juxtapositioning of all that, the sound and the visual, it leaves a lasting impression. And the next one's done the same way?
Next one is similar. Well, that's another one out of that series. So there's not a lot of difference, but there's enough. So you could see in a slide presentation they just change subtly.
And this is due to the type of film that you actually use. Oh, that's very interesting. So, you know, I'm fascinated by the way that you can get all these different effects coming through.
Oh, and there's another consideration, the speed of the film. And I have some black and white shots coming up to show reasons for why you would choose speed. This shot is done with 100 ASA in daylight, and if you use a fine grade film such as 100 ASA or a 64 ASA, you do get a fine detail, and that's what I wanted in this shot. But if you're, say, indoors and wanted a softer effect, you would have to use a faster film. Well, you wouldn't be able to get the right amount of exposure anyway. So you'd have to buy a faster film such as 200 ASA, 400 ASA, 800, 1000 even.
Yes.
And when you go up to those speeds, you get a lot more grain. So it is a very soft look.
This is actually under the Garrett Road Bridge, isn't it? And if you look closely, you can see the tagging that's on the... I like the way that you've created that sense of perspective that zooms away from you. And it's interesting the play of geometrics that are there, you know, the receding rectangles that move away with you, and you've cut it by using the diagonal as well. So yes, it's a very interesting photograph. It'd be an interesting one to paint.
That was actually used with a 5.4 camera with this size film,
So it comes from that same size.
Yeah, and the 5.4 cameras is the ones quite big, but you have to put the black hood over the back, so it's quite a lot of equipment I had to drag under the bridge.
Really? I hope you had lots of assistants.
Yeah, I had a few.
You did? Oh, good.
So the next shot shows this one was taken inside, and this was a much faster film. It is a softer image, but
Yes.
if I would have used 100 ASA, I wouldn't have been able to get the exposure for that.
Right. But I like the play of light and dark in this one. Now, I have heard that serious photographers really appreciate what we call black and white photography because they like manipulating the tonal values. Is that true?
You're in control with it. With colour, the RA4 machine or whatever you use is so expensive, and the chemicals are so expensive. It's so much better to go and put it through a lab. But with the black and white, you can set yourself up with very economically with a little darkroom.
Yeah.
And now with the Photoshop and digital cameras, it's so easy to manipulate on the computer as well.
Yeah. There's a lovely sense of tembrism that comes through this as well, the sense of drama that comes down through the figure, but also this play of light against dark. And I like the way you've captured this light here, then this dark line, and then the light down below, and then the gradation of values that move through there. Yes, it's a fascinating shot. What's the next one look like? Ah.
Now we're talking about depth of field, I think, in these particular shots.
Yes, I think this is definitely depth of field. I think you better explain what that is.
Depth of field is, well, we should talk about aperture and speed.
Yes, you'd have to, wouldn't you?
Which are the two things that you need for correct exposure. So,
do you have anything?
The aperture is the F number on the... It's how wide... Inside here, you have a... It opens and closes.
Oh, right, yes.
And by moving this around, you get a wide aperture, or a small aperture, or a big aperture.
Right. When you have a big one, you let more light in?
That's right. But that has to relate to the speed of how fast the image is taken too. So those two things have to relate. And then you get the correct exposure. If you have a big hole opening, it's usually a small F number. It's the opposite to what you would think. And so if you have a small hole, then you would have to use a lot more light.
Light,
yes.
Right.
So with these two particular things that you're manipulating, you can choose one over the other. You can buy a lot of cameras that are just totally automatic. But if you want to do something like this, you can't just set it on automatic and get a result such as that. You have to know about aperture and know about speed, what each does for you. Now, when you are talking about depth of field, it's how sharp the image is from the front to the back. And in close-up photography, you really need a sharp result right through the image. If we go back to the flower, can we go back to the flower?
I think we should be able to go back to the flower. Let's see if we can go back to the flower.
Oh, here it comes.
Here we are.
You can see that the depth of field here it's much shorter, reduced, because this area here is sharp, but the background is just blown out. Now you can choose to do that if you want to. So the rule usually is big F number, big depth of field.
Right.
Okay, so if you can, I've always remembered that.
Big F number.
Big depth of field.
Big depth of field.
So you would set your aperture on to get a great, everything sharp within your picture. You would try and get the biggest aperture, or big F number you can.
All right.
So you'd set it on F16 or 22, and then you would put your speed to relate to that and hope to get the right exposure.
You know, the more I hear, I think I'd go for the $10 camera. It seems to do everything for you. You don't have to think.
Well, they're making cameras better and better these days. Because when I was studying photography, the best lenses were the ones that you put on and put off, fixed ones. But now, the zoom, which you have 2 or 3 lenses in one, are extremely good. And compact cameras usually give you very good results as well.
Right.
Technology is getting better and better.
So a lot of it, you know, can you talk a little bit more how a lens operates? What happens with the lens? What does the lens do in the camera?
Well, it records the image, and you're in control of how it records the image.
Mm-hmm.
You either choose, there's those 2 components, the speed and the aperture.
Aperture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the lens does.
Well, after you've set that, it records it how you set it, basically.
Right.
So you're in control. If you put it on automatic, it would just take the same type of picture all the time.
All the time, without any variance.
That's right, and quite often give you the wrong exposure.
Right.
For reasons that we won't go into at the moment.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I was talking about the depth of field, choosing the aperture to get certain results with the flower and the starfish. You can also set it on the speed first and then move the aperture around to correlate to the speed. Now this particular shot here, the speed was chosen first. So we've set it on a very slow speed. It's called panning, this particular method.
Panning.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that you've got to sort of move with the camera to capture your...
That's right.
Yes.
So if we just took this on a fast speed, such as 1,000th of a second or a 500th of a second, everything in that image will be able to see the people in the crowd, the pebbles on the road, and the car will be a blur.
Oh.
Because it's moving. Oh no, sorry. It will capture that. It will capture everything. You'll see everything that you want to see. But there's reasons for blurring the speed. So for this one, we want to see the car, but we're not interested in the crowd. So we put it on a slow speed and then move with the image.
That would take a bit of rehearsal, I would think.
It does.
To judge that movement.
Mm-hmm.
And
to get it within that frame.
Yes.
You can see this particular section here is still blurry because the photographer, when they took this shot, it actually moved, it skidded on the ground at the back, but it didn't skid at the front. But if it hadn't have skidded, it would have been sharp all the way through, and that would have remained blurry.
But that skidding makes it a more interesting photograph, doesn't it? I like the way you've captured that sense of speed with the blurring of the background. So that's an artistic choice to accentuate the sense of movement coming right through.
And there's another shot talking about
speed.
The choice of speed.
Don't you like these dissolves? Aren't they marvellous?
Yes. Now with this one, if I had it on a fast speed, the water would have been frozen in time. You would have captured all of the elements of that water. But I chose to put it on a slow speed to blur the water. So that's another choice that you're making.
Right.
But while you're on that slow speed, you have to have it on a tripod.
Ah, so this is where the tripod comes in. Yes. But you've really captured that sort of feeling of the avant descent, haven't you, with the water flowing right round those rocks. And it's also allowed you to bring out the colour of the rocks, which of course is reflected in the water. And the diagonal line, of course, accentuates the sense of movement as well.
So this is only a mechanical tool and you're telling it what to do all the time?
Yes. I think that's where, you know, a lot of people have difficulty, isn't it? Because they want the camera to do all the thinking. This is what I was saying, that at my knowledge of photography, I would be using the automatic camera, which takes most of the joy out of photography. Yes. Fascinating. So yes, you've got to know about your speed, you've got to know about your exposure, you've got to know about your apertures.
So to get it right, there is a meter, a light meter within the camera that's called through the lens metering. Now, there is a little button inside these, or a lever or whatever, that tells you when you've got the exposure right. You can rely on this meter in here, or you can have a handheld meter, which is this one here, which are quite expensive. And you may have seen when professional photographers go up and they take a reading from the person's face. That's where they're going to take the shot. They use these handheld meters, which if you become more professional, you really need these. You can't rely on what this is telling you all the time.
Now, we've looked at so much this morning already, but perhaps if we can do like a little recap, if we could look at, say, the next image, and then we can talk about some of the things that we've looked at before. Here we go. Ah, yes. This is a marvellous shot at the University of Western Australia, is it?
Mm-hmm.
What were you trying to achieve in this one?
Well, I think I was trying to achieve a great depth of field, but didn't quite achieve that. You can see it's very sharp in the foreground and middle ground, but not quite at the back. So even I make mistakes.
Oh, well, that's all right. I mean, that sometimes can create a very interesting image. What I've got to remember is the bigger the F, the bigger the depth of field.
That's right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
That's right.
Good. Okay. Now here what we've got is a marvellous example of one-point perspective. The perspective zooms away from you, and I like what you've got here in what I would call unity with variety, because you've got the repeat of the arches on both sides as they zoom away from you, but you've also got the contrast to that in that the architectural devices in the roof of the colonnade are straight, they are horizontal, which is in contrast to the shape of the arches. Now, the other thing that you've got here is a sense of timbrism. That's that sharp definition between light and dark. Now, you're talking about the depth of field, and yes, the image at the front is quite sharp, and down at the back in that arch there, it's quite sharp, but I can see that the figure at the end of the colonnade is blurred.
That's right.
So yes. I also like the way the light globes disappear down. So it's a very interesting composition. If we can look at the next one, bye-bye, off you go, good. And here's the next one coming in. Now, in this one, you've still got the play of light, but perhaps you'd like to explain a little bit more about this.
Well, this is using a smaller depth of field. By deliberately blurring the foreground, we didn't really want all of that information in there. Sometimes there's too much information. So if you had a particular subject that was extremely important, such as the Queen standing there at this particular spot, then you would choose a short depth of field to enhance that particular person, rather than having it sharp right the way through and taking the focus off that person by wanting to have to look at this pillar. Or whatever it is there.
So you'd lower the F.
Yes,
to
the number.
The number, yes. So you'd lower that F number down so that you would get a shorter depth of field. And that brings things closer to you into sharper focus. And looking here, yes, I like the way that you've composed this actually. It shows the fine artist in you, because you've got the blurring here on either side. It goes through to the sharp definition in that arch. But I like the way the unity works in here, because you've got this unity here of that archway repeated over there in that one. That's repeated in here, and then this one here works in contrast to that one. So again, you've got unity and variety, which adds to a very interesting composition. Excellent. Now, another thing that's happened in the 20th century was what we call photo montage. And that's where the photographer uses a number of images and compresses them together, or works like what Picasso did with collage. And that really is what a photo montage is, isn't it? A photo montage is a collage. Now, if we take an image like this one here, and just to let the viewers know what I'm looking at here, we'll see it on the monitor as well. Here we go. There. Now, this is one of your photographs, isn't it? And it shows a very interesting composition with that lovely sweep in of that line coming in to the play of light and dark. Now, instead of cutting up the real photograph, what you do is you take photocopies of it, and then you can cut it up. And this is how you would do a photo montage. So you can cut away, have a lovely old time hacking into it. Now, if you're going to do this with your photographs of, say, you're doing a self-portrait, you don't attack the family album. What you do is that you take the photos from the photo album and the things that you're interested in, because remember it's a self-portrait in a photo montage, and you take photocopies of them. Then you can manipulate the images, enlarge them, make them smaller, cut them out, play with them, turn them around and upside down, all kinds of things. Then you can take a piece of paper. Now on this one there's been a print made, it's just a roller print, and you can place these images around on the paper. You can play with a whole range of these images, more than one if you wish, and you can put things like things that influence, say, Picasso, and put them in, and you're interested in, say, Aboriginal art, so you can put that in, and you glue them down, and you can end up with an image like this one here. Now, would you like to comment about this?
Yes, you can either be successful in making a single image which says something, or you can use multiple imagery to get your message across.
Yes.
As fine art, you're communicating with people. You're telling them something a little bit more.
Well, of course, in this one here, what you've got is the photographs that you've taken, and then they've been cut out, manipulated through the computer, through the photocopier as well. You can see that they've been pasted over a print, and then down here it shows that the person is interested in gardening and also interested in images of Monet, because that's what you've got down here. Interested in theatre, so there's a play of the theatre there, and of course interested in colour as well. So the photo montage works. Now you can do that in photography as well. If we look at the next image on the monitor, you've got this fascinating image.
This is a photograph I actually took before I started playing with the digital imagery, and the particular subject was placed physically under the veranda for me to obtain this shot. But of course nowadays you wouldn't have to do that. You could take 2 single shots and then compile them in a program such as Photoshop on the computer.
But that looks rather spooky. Was she very comfortable down there?
I made her very comfortable.
Oh, good. I'm pleased to hear that. She looks a lovely old lady.
She is.
Right. And you've covered up the gaps in the floorboard with what, autumn leaves?
Yes.
What was the real subject here? Was it...
This was a series of shots. I was talking about old age, and I was talking about how people cut themselves off when they think they're going to die, and they isolate themselves. A lot about isolation, but it was one of many. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Did she have fun?
Well, I paid her for doing it. And she was
Right.
interested in
In
that
her...
aspect of it, yes. But I wasn't too cruel.
No, oh, good.
I wasn't too cruel.
I like it from the point of view that, all right, you can see the lines on her face, you can see the autumn leaves, which of course refers to the autumn phase of life as well. I like the old floorboards and the old buildings and the old landscape at the back. There's something about this that reminds me of Tom Roberts's work, Shearing the Rams, and it's because of the geometric construction that you've got. This window at the back that looks out into the landscape. So it's quite a fascinating one. And the next one would be?
The next one is just a shot that I wanted to show how you could take a whole roll of subjects that you could use later on to manipulate. Like as you can see, it's not a very, it's not an exhibition shot because the light in here is fogging or coming in too much at that side. But I just wanted the figure to cut out.
Right. And
For montage.
for montage, yes. So you took this one.
I set that girl up in that particular. So your students can do that. They can go out and take a roll of film and set up their subjects and use them.
Use them.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with the next one.
This is just a local park where I live. So I took that and I wanted to do an Ophelia type image.
Ophelia from Shakespeare's Hamlet. Oh dear. That's where she goes drifting down the river.
She falls in the river, yeah.
Yes, and she talks about flowers and things and forget-me-nots. Let's have a look at what you did with the photo montage.
Well, there she is in the river. So I scanned those two images in and then I reduced her and placed her. But I'm still not sure whether she's too big. I did this very quickly. So maybe the placement of this is not quite right just yet. I'm not sure.
Right, so you're still manipulating
still
that.
Manipulating that.
Because you've taken your photographs, scanned them into the computer and manipulated it that way.
And then printed it out.
And then printed it out.
And that's just printed on a very basic printer. So you can get reasonable results. You know.
Yeah. But you could also do this the method I have just demonstrated with taking two photographs, taking photocopies of them, cutting one out, pasting it into the other. You can achieve the same sort of result. And then photocopying that again so that you can manipulate it even further on the photocopier. Is that possible? Right. It's fascinating, isn't it, what we can do with technology as long as you're in control of the technology. Now, photographers, like a lot of other artists, of course, have to consider what we call the rules of composition. And I've been showing that coming through. Now, but in addition, photographers have to be mindful of other considerations. For example, lighting.
Without light, you can't take a photograph.
Well, I mean, that's what photography is, isn't it? I mean, photography, the word photography means writing with light, as I understand it. Now, what do you, in this image here, this rather beautiful nude, well, she's not strictly nude, but it's a beautiful example of how you've manipulated the light as well.
I wanted a very soft image. So you have to bounce the correct amount of light back into this section here.
Is that what we call backlighting?
No, backlighting's something different when you have the light coming from completely behind and then things such as the hair would light up. That's different.
Oh, right.
This would just be called a fill. Like the direction of the light was coming this way.
From the right-hand side.
And if I didn't put a big white card or another small light on this side, then that would be completely dark. So you're in control of how you portray the subject.
And that's why some photographers use white umbrellas?
Yes. It's a soft, they bounce the light into the umbrella and you get a much softer light falling on the subject.
Okay. Now, your depth of field here is fairly shallow?
Yes, because all we're interested in is the subject. So it is, yes.
Yes. Another characteristic, of course, for the photographer is what I call patience.
Yes. Yeah, it's capturing the moment. And a lot of wildlife photographers capturing wildlife do actually prefer to sit out there in the pond and wait for the duck or whatever to come past, but rather than having a huge lens.
But in addition to that, they've got to wait for the right lighting conditions.
That's
I mean,
right.
if it's, you know, a part cloudy day, they've got to wait for the sun to really come out to get the best shot, or they've got to wait for the wind to drop, or and then hope that the duck or the tiger or the kangaroo, whatever they're filming, is still in an interesting position. So it does take patience. So it's useless going out on a photographic trip with someone who doesn't have the patience, because they...
I think you learn that type
Yeah.
of thing.
You've got to.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the next image.
This is just showing, this is one of my drawings. It's quite huge. And just showing how photography helps me by seeing the light when I'm drawing as well, the light falling across the body. So when you take a photograph, you have to see instantly, you have to compose instantly. And when you're drawing, if you use very fast marks, it's got a lot of vitality rather than drawing slowly. So I draw fast and I try and capture that moment quickly, just like photography.
Yes.
But it's looking at light in a similar way.
But there's also a skill in taking photographs of artwork, isn't there?
Yes, yes.
And it's best not to do it it's best to do it rather when it's unframed and no glass, because otherwise you get refraction and all the rest of it. It really does show the play of light moving across.
Well, that's when you'd really need an SLR camera to do art, to take photographs of artworks, that and up, because your little point and shoot camera, you can't get the distance. Your focal distance is only about this,
say
a metre away, and if you go any closer, if your subject is very tiny, then it all blurs. So there's limitations on those very cheap cameras, especially photographing artworks.
Right. And the next one?
It's another one of my drawings. I just wanted to show my drawings of.
Good for you, why not? So you've got, you know, things that the photographer has to remember is sort of like angle of shot.
That's right. Well, this is showing angle.
And the focusing, you've got to have patience, you've got to consider the lighting, you've also got to consider the composition, obviously, and we've spoken about that with, you know, images of the university and how you're getting unity and variety, how you're getting contrast, how you're using your tonal values, establishing timbrism or just ordinary chiaroscuro, and working that through.
With the composition, when you're drawing, you have a little bit longer to compose, thinking where that's going to sit on the page. But when you've got a moving subject and a camera, you have to instantly imagine what it's going to look like and take that perfect shot.
Yes.
So your eyes sort of flicking around that little picture plane very quickly. And I think it's a learnt thing. Here's another shot. This is just showing the play of light. But I wanted to show you this, and just as a normal photographic shot, as a tool to a fine art process, the next two shots, what I did with this particular slide.
Well, let's have a look at the next one. Oh, isn't that fascinating?
This is a process, a Polaroid transfer process, where I took two slides and sandwiched them. One of them was the previous shot, and the veins in the body you can see is a roadway at my local shopping centre. Actually, there's a division in I think this is a painted sign or something, and the cracks in the pavement, and this is actually gravel here. But the process is you take a Polaroid shot on the, if I can reach over here, this is the Polaroid. You must have it in a Polaroid pack like this. And I've been transferring my 35mm slides onto the Polaroid film. Before you do the proper exposure of the film, leaving it for 2 minutes, warming it up and leaving it for 2 minutes, you pull it apart beforehand, and then you press it onto paper, and it transfers onto your paper and gives this lovely soft edge around here.
And this was done on fabric, was it?
This particular one was done on silk because I teach textiles as well.
Right. Let's have a look at the next one.
A similar thing, but the sandwiched part of this was a little pond with lots of sticks in it this time.
Marvellous. So this would be the fine art side of photography.
Photography, yeah.
Yes. If we move into the next lot, we'll see the range of photography. This, I think, is what, advertising?
This could be advertising. This is a commercial shot I did when I was studying. Yes.
And it was for that image, yes.
This is could be portraiture. This is a black and white shot that I did, and then I hand coloured certain aspects of it, like the eyes and the bow and the little toy down here.
And this one, of course, wedding photography.
Wedding photography. This is actual friend of mine is a wedding photographer and took this shot.
Right. And of course you get the colour, and then you'll have...
People work in colour.
I like the little touch of red.
Most professional photographers, or a lot of them in Perth, work with weddings because that's your biggest market, really.
Right.
And then they do other things on the side.
And they can do it in colour, and they can do it in black and
in
white.
Black and white. There's a black and white shot
yes,
coming
if
up.
you look at this next one.
Neil Berry took these shots. He's a friend of mine.
Oh, Neil
Berry?
Berry. Is that B-R-R-Y?
That's right. This shot and the previous shot. And this is in Perth.
Yes, this is on that walkover over the freeway. Yes, from, say, Kings Park down.
But even though it's a commercial shot, the composition is quite exciting in that
Yes, it is.
piece.
And I think really, from my point of view, I prefer the black and white to the colour for somehow or other, because the composition comes across in a much stronger way. The colour tends to distract from the black and white. So that's another range of the market for photography. And we can move on to this one.
I would say this would be in the fine art category,
Yes.
category again. This is another one of mine.
Yes. That raises an interesting point, because what you're really referring to there is copyright. If you take the photograph, the copyright is yours. It
Yes.
stays with you.
If you've been given the film as an assignment, then the person who gives you the film has rights to that film. They own it.
They own it.
You can't take shots off yourself because you like them, because they paid for the film and gave
Right.
you the film.
Okay.
But if it's your film, you take the shots, then they're your shots.
Yes, yes. Now, you know, we've covered so many aspects of photography. And if we look at the next image, what we have here is a fascinating area for many photographers, and that's the fashion world, working with live models. And of course they go through rehearsals, of course. But would you like to talk about this one?
This was a student, fashion student from Central TAFE at the time, who wanted some shots for her portfolio. So,
Here you have it. So what, she's moving?
she's moving. Just to make, well, you have to make interesting shots, like when you're working for magazines such as Vogue. A lot of the shots don't really show the dress or the garments. It's the actual fine art nature of the shot that really gets through, and then they look at what the person's wearing.
Wearing. Yes. I'm attracted, of course, to all these dark things that she's got. And the relationship between, say, these, whatever they are, buttons or bits of plastic in the shape of the mouth. So the composition is very, she's obviously aware of that compositional point because she was a student in the fashion industry, but you've also picked up on it.
But it was a lot of fun.
Yes.
The main thing is to get out there and have fun.
I think that's an important ingredient, that they have to have fun. If we look at the next one, we've got this incredible photograph. I think you said this came from Hong Kong.
That's right.
So you've got all the busy of the billboards and neon signs, this beautiful calligraphy, and then there's influence of Western culture in these sort of bridal gowns. And this one's very dark.
I think that was probably a red colour, and there was a few white ones. But I was thinking in hindsight, maybe I should put a bit of hand colouring in there. All of the buildings in this area were very grey. They don't paint their buildings. So that's probably why it photographs so well with the greys.
Yes, because you've got a strong contrast there between light and dark and all the tonal values that move through it.
Because that was the colour of it.
Yes, Hong Kong is like that, isn't it?
And I think it's a wonderful contrast, this
Pristine, yes.
image here.
The pristine image here and the contrast there. And I think on that note, we'll say goodbye to the folks out there. You know, I mean, it's been a really fascinating day with what we've done, what we've looked at. I've certainly looked at a lot of things that I hadn't seen before. I like the one, you know, the bigger the F, the bigger the depth of field. But we've looked at the different types of camera.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about film. We've talked about exposure. We've talked about the F, the aperture. By the way, the F refers to focus. We've talked about photomontage and how people can have fun with that. And I like your point that we should have fun with whatever we do. Thank you very much, Marilyn, for coming in today.
Thank you, Carl.
It's really been very interesting. And so, bye, viewers. Enjoy yourselves.
This program was brought to you by the Western Australian Department of Training and Employment. For further information on this or any other TAFE course, call the Training Info Centre on 1800 999 167.